Home Trails podcast presented by me, ultrarunning Sam. Now, this podcast is part of the Home Trails media entity that encompasses our Home Trails documentaries. You may have seen them on YouTube, so where we interview famous ultra runners from around the world and in the UK at the moment. We film them on the trail and in the home, obviously, Home Trails. Get those insights into their training, big races they've done, and then just their background information. Try and dig a bit deeper into what motivates them to go and do these amazing things that they do. Also, part of Home Trails is new for this year is our live podcast coming from big races. You may have seen us at the Spine Race in January. We were there doing our thing all week. Later on in the summer, we will be at the Lap in the Lake District, and then keep your eyes peeled for other races where we'll be popping up and doing media coverage for some big races, hopefully. So, obviously, we have a podcast now, so we'll keep doing this every week. Keep churning out the podcasts with famous runners and people in the industry, anyone that we can get on that we feel that you might be interested in related to trail running and ultra running. So on with our guest. Okay, so welcome to the Home Trails podcast with me, your host, your loving host, ultra running Sam. Just a quick catch up of what's gone on over the weekend. So it's now Monday night, and over the weekend, obviously, we had Montane Lakeland 50 and 100. So if you'd sort of not heard the results of that, so in the men's race for the 100, obviously Damien Hall won that in 19 hours, 33 minutes, 33 seconds. Second was Rye Webb in 20 hours and 5 minutes, and third place was Jarlath McKenna, 20 hours 41. So basically they're all like separated by half an hour, it seems. And then for the women's race, Anna Llewellyn was first. Big shout out to Charlotte Fisher, taking second in 24 hours. And then Sarah Page, obviously coming in not far behind that, 40 minutes. No, 20 minutes behind, 25 minutes behind Charlotte. So great weekend. So special shout out to Charlotte, fan of the show. We'll obviously get her on at some point. But special mention to Mark Cox, my mate Mark from over Leicestershire, who we've raced together before a few times. He managed to pull in ninth. So awesome result for Mark. So well done, mate. Special mention for you. Right. I've got to get on with the podcast because our guest is waiting in the waiting room. She's early, so we're gonna dive straight into this. So I'll just pause and we'll come back. Right, we are recording again. So official first welcome to the Home Trails podcast, Tonya Olson.
Yay! I'm so
Small
glad to be
crowd.
here. Yeah. Anytime I get to talk about feet, I'm happy.
Yeah, so for people that don't know who you are, you are the co-author of one of the most infamous books in ultra running, Fixing Your Feet. And I don't know whether so if I think if you know about the book, you 100% know who you are and you know how important that book is. And if you don't know what that book is, then you probably either have not been running ultras long enough, or you've not done any races that require major foot care, which there are a lot in the UK. But obviously, Tonya, my first question for you is obviously the superhero question. So I've given you like 30 seconds of time to think about this question. So, Tonya, if all of us are superheroes in one way or another in ultra running, and you are a superhero of sorts, what all superheroes have an origin story, how they became who they are. So, Tonya, what is your superhero origin story?
My origin story, my superhero origin story. I think have you heard the term no hoof, no horse? It's
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Yeah, in the horse world, that is, the edict. Like, the horse, just like a human, although there's not enough attention paid to it. If a horse has something go wrong with its foot, it can't function. And tragically, not to be dark immediately, but if a horse has something too wrong with its foot, it may not be able to survive. So I grew up riding horses, and that was something that requires you to be really diligent about their foot care, but also be looking at and analyzing movement and creating exercise plans. And there's a lot of psychology in it, blah, blah, blah. And so that's probably where it all started was, my baseline of skills. And then it just kind of through time, I ended up, oh, well, we had a farm that had baby horses and brood mares and barbed wire, which is not a good combination. And so you would get wounds. So I was doing, taking care of the horses' wounds was a part of my regular routine. And so fast forward, ended up going to physical therapy school. And as fate would have it, I started when I sold my horse. My way to be able to do something interesting with my time that was not horses is I started running marathons. And of course, I'd spent my life on trails with the horses, so I'd rather run on trails. And then in 2005, I ran my first ultra because it was just a natural progression of things. Like and how do you not continue with it? The community is amazing. So
Mm.
it just a little bit of a development of all the things. And then back in '09, I was living in the Pacific Northwest, and some friends of mine were running Western States and crewing and all that. And so I tagged along, and I asked my friend Sean Meisner, who's a ultra runner here in the US. I said, Sean, what should I do? Like, I want to help out. And he goes, oh, go to Michigan Bluff, work with John Von Hoff. And so I just rolled up to Michigan Bluff, and I was like, hi, is there a guy named John here? And it turns out we're just simpatico as far as, our views on foot care. Embarrassingly enough, I think at the time I'd heard of the book, but I don't know that I'd read it. But yeah, I worked with him for 10 years at Michigan Bluff at Western States before he retired. And the physician who was the medical captain was a 10-time finisher of states. So from a physiology and psychology perspective, I kind of mentored with those two for 10 years. And John asked me to co-author the latest edition, the seventh edition of the book, and we added 77 pages because
Wow.
my PT world knowledge is just kind of it has a different kind of takes his foot care approach to a whole nother level. So
Mm.
kind of a
Yeah.
long answer to a short question, but
That's good. That's good. The more you talk, the less I talk. So that's nobody wants to hear me talking on the podcast. They want to hear the guest. Um, so yeah, so you were aware of the book before you sort of got involved with it and everything. So how did it feel like a sort of a natural progression for you to sort of add in the things that you were learning? So what sort of thing did you bring to the book then that wasn't there before? And I know bits of this because I have got the book and I can't find it anywhere. I think I've lent it to somebody, which obviously that is the kind of thing that you do with that book is you like pass on the knowledge to other people. And I don't remember who I gave it to. Somebody out there in my world has got it and is benefiting from it, and I could do with having it back. So whoever it is, if you're listening, I want it back. So how did you get involved with it?
In physical therapy, the basis of our training is to identify the cause of what is happening so that you're fixing the cause, not just addressing the symptoms. And so that's really just so for me, when somebody comes in, especially if it's during a race, somebody comes in with a blister in a particular spot or like a hot spot or something like that, my brain automatically goes to, okay, first I want to address this issue so that we can get the runner back out on the trail. But I also want to educate and figure out so that runner is getting can figure out how to prevent this from happening again. Its prevention is critical, and that's probably the biggest thing I wish my biggest part of my platform is foot care issues are largely preventable. And so that's kind of where, so for me, like I'm kind of investigating. You're sitting down, you've got a blister on your toe, and I'm looking at your range of motion in your foot and the range of motion in your big toe, and what kind of shoes are you wearing, and what is contributing to that particular injury. So then that, my vision is so that the runner, we're not just fixing the problem, or we're not just fixing the symptoms, addressing the symptoms, we're getting to the root of the problem so it won't happen in the future. That's kind of where it all,
Mm,
that's my focus.
yeah, I think that's the section that I sort of focused on. So I'm not sure if you're familiar. My listeners are completely familiar with this race, but I'm not sure if you've heard of the winter spine race in
Mm,
the UK.
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
there's different sort of iterations of that race. There's like a summer version, which now they've got one, two, three, five versions of that race in the summer. So they've got a sprint version, a sprint south, which is 46 miles, Challenger South, which is 108, Challenger North, which is 160, Sprint North, which is around 40 something, and then you've got the full spine, which is 268 miles. So there's five versions in summer and five versions in winter.
Oh
Um,
boy.
and those races are very different and they're as hard as each other in different ways. So in the summer, obviously it's warmer and there's different issues that you have there. And in winter, you've got the cold. So my experience with the race is that on the shorter races, my feet were never an issue, but I did one of the summer versions, so the Challenger North, which is 160 miles, um, and my feet were, even though it was a summer race, were absolutely destroyed because it rained like torrential rain for the first sort of 24 hours of that race, and then it became incredibly hot, and obviously feet were swelling, and that sort of caused issues. And my feet were so bad that like once, I mean, after most ultras, I kind of say never again, but this was every
We
single
all,
step was just agony, and I was like, I don't think I can do that ever again. But I was already signed up for the winter full race, so I'd gone from doing 160 miles, and then 6 months later, I would be doing the full 268 miles in winter. So I was like, I need to sort my feet out. This is like the most important thing. Training is absolutely fine. I know that I can do the training, but if my feet are that bad after 160 miles, then how bad are they going to be with another 100 miles on them?
yeah,
But I don't know whether the temperature made so much of a difference or the things that I did to prepare for it actually helped. So the bit that I sort of focused on was, you talk about sort of preparing your feet. And one of the things I'd noticed that with going into that summer race is that I'd got, hard spots, raised like, calloused bits of skin. And I did my best to sort of moisturize my feet to work on all those hard, calloused points on my feet to try because I know that obviously that I know where the blisters started and I could pinpoint the exact places they started. So I knew that those bits of my feet needed to be as soft as possible. So I kind of spent a lot of time working on that. And then when it actually came around to the winter race, and I did the full race, 268 miles, I literally only had like minor issues with my feet. I had like one toenail, my tiny little toenail on one toe was like floating around inside a blister. But it didn't cause me any issues at all, like weirdly. And then I had a couple of little hot spots that I had to like tape up, and I managed them really well. And how much of that is temperature related, and how much is because it's hard to know whether the work you've done has made a difference or not. What's your sort of take on that? And I know this is a very long-winded question. What makes the
very
most difference? Like, is it the weather and conditions, or can you 100% prepare your feet so well that you don't have issues?
well. Uh, this famous answer is always it depends. Here's the thing. So, oh, I just lost my train of thought.
Which what is it? The weather or is it the preparation that
Oh,
works?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. You can't quantify prevention. And
Yeah.
that's the rub. You're like, what did I prevent? But not trying to prevent is definitely quantifiable by the blisters and whatever and anything that happens. But I do sympathize with folks because the most common thing people say to me, especially during a race, is I've never had this happen before.
Mm,
Every single person. And I'll be like, well, if it's at Western States at mile 55, I'll say, well, did you train on these trails? Where do you live? And they're like, I live in Ohio. So their training environment is frequently very different than the race environment, and
mm,
then you have the things that go sideways that you have no control over, which is, the weather, the temperatures and all that. But there are still things that you can do to prevent. Like, here's the thing that just completely vexes me. It confuses me to no end. You have your hydration and nutrition strategies from A to Z. You've got 10,000, 15 contingency plans for your food and your nutrition. But the average runner pays no attention. There is no foot care plan. They don't even have foot care products. They don't even know what products that they could use. Like it's like you're ignoring the most important part of your body, the part of your body that is absolutely essential for running. I mean, like, it's just beyond my comprehension. But they're like, but it didn't happen in training. And so that's where, like, part of my platform is like, people need to have a basic level of competent evidence-based current best practices as far as the interventions that they're doing for their foot care. Now, circling back to your description of what your issue is I love that you identified because you saw where the blisters were. So you thought back and you're like, okay, I would imagine that the blisters were callus adjacent. Calluses, it's interesting. Some people can get away with having calluses and they cause them no problem. Some people have nothing but trouble. But at the end of the day, a callus is happening for a reason. It's like an oyster. An oyster, they get like a piece of sand on their tongue or their body or whatever's in there. And then it creates the pearl to cushion their soft flesh from the sand that got into the shell. It's the same thing, basically the same thing is happening with the callus, is there's an area of friction where as you move, you're getting extra friction or extra pressure in one area. And that can have, it's multifactorial as to why that's happening. But then your body builds up extra skin. It piles on more dead skin in that area to reduce the cushion, to provide some cushioning and reduce the friction in that area. And that can work just fine in training. The problem is that when you do longer races, it's hard to prepare for a longer race without running a longer race, right? And so the biggest variable that is worth controlling or is critical for controlling in ultra running in particular or any endurance event where you're going to be out and about for a long time is maceration. And that's where, when you wash your dishes or you're in the jacuzzi and your skin kind of wrinkles up
mm,
and gets kind of whitish gray, that's happening on your foot. And if you pay attention next time that happens to your fingertips, what you'll notice is that the skin is actually swollen and those wrinkles are actually an indication that the top layer, the epidermis, which is completely dead skin, it's only dead. It's actually the connection to the layer underneath, the dermis that has the blood vessels and nerves in it. That connection is weakened by maceration. And so the tissue, that epidermis, which is what gets damaged during when a blister forms, that tissue is actually weaker. So maceration makes your skin more fragile and prone to injury. And so in those areas where you have a little bit of rubbing or a little bit of friction, then so in the case of a callus, you have extra skin that is taking up more space. When it gets macerated or waterlogged, now that callus becomes larger and the profile of it becomes more rough.
Mm.
And so it's going to catch on things in a way that it wouldn't have caught on things if it wasn't waterlogged and puffy and damaged or fragile. So here's the thing with the calluses, they are very risky to keep in place during a longer race because when the callus swells up from being macerated and it's rough, taking up more space, that callus actually moves on the tissue below, which is the dermis, where the blood vessels and the nerves are. And then underneath that is a bone. So here are the two things to be able to understand. Friction is when two things are moving against each other, like your little toe and the inside of the shoe, like your little toe and the one next to it. They're both moving. And then that's usually more of a superficial damage that happens. So that's going to be where your typical blister. Whereas a callus, because it's taking up more space and it's moving and it's at an area where there's more pressure, you have something called shearing forces
Mm.
happening, where one thing is moving on something that doesn't move. And that's where you have significantly more pain and damage caused by the callus because the tissues that are being damaged are the dermis. The dermis is caught between the callus and the bone underneath, and that's where blood blisters happen. And that's why that was so much more painful for you to be
Mm.
happening because the dermis, where the blood vessels and the nerves live, was damaged. And so that's a really long explanation to the causative factors behind why your feet were so excruciatingly painful. And it's maceration. It's the fragility of the fragility of the skin that's caused by maceration is really the source of all foot issues during endurance events. Like, have you ever wondered, like, your toes have been next to each other your entire life? Why do they only argue when you're running a long race? Like, seriously, right? And it's
Yeah.
because the skin is fragile. They're not
Mm.
rubbing different. They're next to each other like they always have. They're just the skin's more fragile from maceration. And let's just dispel a very important myth or
Mm.
misunderstanding.
I know what you're going to say as well. Yeah.
You know it. The main source of moisture that damages your foot skin is your foot. It is not the creek that you go, unless your feet are immersed for hours on end or
Mm.
continuously. It is not the creek crossing that you do twice in 260 miles or any of that. Rucky Chucky at Western States. That's
Mm.
not the cause. It's the 250,000 sweat glands that are
Mm.
on each one of your feet that are pumping out salt water onto your skin from the first step that you take. And so those are variables to consider. And I really appreciate that you were proactive and you know that you need to wrangle your calluses under control. You need to control those calluses
Mm.
during the longer.
Yeah.
But anyhow,
Yeah.
that's long answer to all the things. So that's kind of where my brain goes.
Mm.
Of course, unless you compare and contrast, like in the water in the race that you did where you had painful feet, that definitely the rain did not help because what's the
Mm.
rain doing? It's changing the terrain that you're on. And so the ground is soft and squishy. So your foot's going to be moving around a little bit more in that shoe.
Mm.
And so then that's going to exacerbate or amplify any areas where you have more pressure, more friction, or where things are, or the shearing forces that are happening. So all those variables contribute to the foot issues that you had.
Mm. So is it more important then to try to be keeping your feet dry, or is that what you're saying, that it's not about keeping your feet dry, it's more about the movement? Do you know what I mean by that?
It's all of it. It's all of it. Yeah.
Mm.
And like with time you'll learn like people have their own people have their own propensities. You just the way that their foot moves, the shoes that you choose. There's so many. This is an article or a book I need to write. I just haven't had time. Finally, I finished my PhD in April, and I just didn't realize how much that was like just taking my brain space. The thought, the thinking that is behind the vast majority of runners' decision as to what shoes to wear is deeply flawed.
Mm,
And so there's a lot of times people are in the exact wrong shoe. And they're just considering, what is like trendy, or some runner that they like is wearing a shoe and
mm,
they want to wear it, even though their feet are built totally different and they're built totally different and they run on totally different terrain. That's a whole big long conversation. But definitely being aware of how the different variables affect your feet or the foot skin is where you start your basis of being able to critically think about foot care. It's the same thing. You're doing the same critical thinking during a race with your hydration and your nutrition plan. There should be this, not this, it doesn't even have to, it's not even this on the same level, but just having a basic understanding of, okay, this is going to be a wet race. Here are the things that I need to do that are successful for me that will keep my feet more dry and stave maceration off for as long as possible, because it will happen if you're out there long enough. And so mitigating the damage. And that's where I like creeks or rivers in a race, because it actually, for the first time in the race, the runner's thinking about their feet. So
mm,
we'll just go with that. But yeah, you just have to understand the causative variables and just address them as best you can. And then, experience will help you understand what works best for you.
mm. When you talk about the fit of a shoe, then are we talking about should we be looking at something that is like a wide toe box, for example? Like, for years I ran in ultras with zero drop and don't remember really having issues with blisters, but then I wasn't doing the really long races that I have done in recent years. And then when I had those issues, when my feet were the worst, I noticeably knew that those shoes that I had on for that race were by midway. I thought these shoes are too narrow for me. They weren't an issue in training. I'd worn them for a race, but as soon as I got over about 70 miles, I thought these shoes aren't right for this race. They feel too narrow at this point. But maybe that was just because that's when the blisters were starting to form in that race. Not really sure. So what's your sort of, can you advise people on what kind of shoe they should be looking at to reduce blisters, or is it literally like you've got to just try every type of shoe in different shape and size?
There are definitely things that you can do. And so you just touched on a really good point where, for longer races, it is often advantageous to switch to a different type of shoe based on the amount of time you're out there, or the terrain itself, the terrain and the conditions themselves. And I think that's a strategy that a lot of people are not availing themselves of. So more often than not, it is not about the toe box. Most people's feet do not need a wide toe box. There's a range of motion issue at the ankle or the big toe that is causing the toes to be moving differently in the shoe. So it's that toe movement in the shoe that is causing the issue, and it's not the width of the shoe itself. And so as a physical therapist, I see overrepresented in people that have issues with feet, especially during races. Folks have less range of motion in their ankle, which is like the calf and Achilles, or they have restricted range of motion in their big toe. And that actually shortens the tendons and the soft tissue in your foot. So an easy an easy thing to do is like if you look at if you take a picture of your foot with from the side and at rest your toes are not perfect, not flat,
Mm.
that you may have some range restrictions that are affecting how your toes are moving because sorry, because in physical therapy one of the things that is the tell that somebody has calf weakness or a range of motion restriction in the ankle are how the toes are moving.
Mm.
So the way that the body works is if you, or just physics, if you have not enough movement in one area, you need to make up for it and have extra in another area. So if you're watching somebody who has tight calves walking across the floor on their bare feet, more often than not, the toes are coming up higher when the foot's in the air. And so it's that toe movement that's causing a lot of the issues that are for the shoe. But
Ah,
people are, yeah, so it's a whole thing. It's a course that I need to build
yeah.
um, now that I have my brain. But I think that is really one of the things. So here's what happens because the zero drop shoes are the trend. We went through this whole thing, the whole barefoot movement, went through that with horses back in the 90s. Swear to
Oh,
God, it was the
really?
same thing. Yeah, some dude went out into the Badlands or the BLM land out west, and he was like, "Oh, look at all these horses. They don't have any footprint problems. Oh, look, it's the shoes. The
Mm.
shoes are destroying the world." And he did the whole thing. There was a barefoot movement with horses. So everyone's taking the horseshoes off. They're doing natural shoeing and natural trimming, so the pendulum swung. It didn't matter what the genetics of the horse was. It was just the bandwagon everyone jumped
Mm.
on to because that's just we're humans and we're just naturally kind of lemming-ish. Pendulum swung, and then now we're in the middle, and now there's just so it forced people to look at things from a different perspective. And the exact same thing is what happened with the Born to Run book and the zero drop
Mm.
shoes and all that. So here's the thing. If your ankle doesn't bend as much as it needs to, and then you have a shoe where you have a zero drop or a low drop shoe, your tissues when your when your foot's on the ground, your tissues in your foot and your calf are at end range. There should be some play available, but they're constantly at end range. So the I think the most prevalent mistake folks are making is they're choosing a zero drop or a low drop shoe because they're trendy, and they're not doing the math on picking a shoe that is appropriate for their particular range of motion. So if
Mm.
you don't have much range in your ankle, for one, you can recover it. You can do stuff to improve that in your ankle and your foot. But if you're doing a longer race, running at end range, for a long, long time can create injuries. It causes your toes to move differently in the shoe. So, bringing the ground, we call it accommodating. So, if you've got range restriction in your ankle, having a higher drop, lifting that shoe up to accommodate that range of motion that's missing
Mm.
so that your tissues are in mid range when you're moving, that can solve a lot of problems for runners. And so then you kind of also feet need variety. The other like error that people have is they want to wear one shoe all the time.
Mm.
There should be variety in the way in your shoes, like so a zero drop, more flexible shoe, depending on how you're built. But in general, zero drop, more flexible shoe is really good for. It's good for shorter distance, running faster. Like what do people wear on the track?
Mm.
They wear
Thanks, yeah.
basically a sole with spikes on it, and
Mm.
the uppers just to keep keep the spikes on.
Mm.
So you've got a really a non-existent. There's no stability or any of that. Like, and so shorter, longer, and then you've got your meat and potatoes shoe that has the components that work well for you, and then you have your shoe that you do for longer races, like
Mm.
a perfect example of like how a shoe choice that is not in keeping with your range of motion and how you're built and how you run. can have immediate effects is like in Florida, I can almost predict it. If there's a 100 miler, this happened a couple years ago and really cemented this theory that I've had for years. We had a 100 miler, and there's not a lot of people. You have to do the loop races here because there's not a lot of point-to-point options. So one of a good portion of the loop, one of the loop had was it had rained, so that ground was not only sandy, but now it was wet and sandy. So when a person's foot would hit the ground, it would sink an inch or
Mm.
2 inches. And on Monday, sure enough, I got half a dozen people reaching out to me saying that they've got plantar fascia pain, they've got calf pain or Achilles pain, and they all were running in lower drop shoes. And so think about it, if they're already at end range when they're in
Mm.
neutral, now they get brought down into past neutral and the soft terrain and a shoe that doesn't accommodate that range restriction. And now your tissues are past end range every time you take a step. So that's some of the higher level thinking, which isn't that higher level. I think that I would
Mm.
like that I'm trying
Makes
to,
sense.
or
Yeah.
does that not make sense? So,
Yeah.
so for those runners, I'm like, here's the thing. Have a pair of shoes that have a higher drop so that can support the range of motion in your ankle and your calf. Have some of those in your quiver. And then if conditions change, you're on softer terrain or even later in a race, give your tissues a break. Put on your high heels, your high heel, your shoes with the higher heel, and just give them a break. Like, and thinking on that way, that more on that line of thinking is, I feel, kind of my platform is just that's just my looking at the cause. So I do see a lot of damage caused by the prevalence of low drop shoes. There's a time and a place, and you need to know how you're built, how you move, what the terrain you're going to be on. And so kind of
Yeah.
doing the math that way.
Mm. That's really interesting. That is another when you explain it, it makes perfect sense when you think about how your feet are and your toes and which drop and how that can affect you. So there's more in it, isn't there, that we need to think about when. So I suppose
Yes.
if you've had issues in a race before with that you always get like blisters on the on the ball of your foot, that's always where you get all of the issues. You don't have issues with your toes, then would you be thinking about a higher drop to bring that forward, or would you bring that backwards by going a lower drop? How
Oh,
would
I
you
love
sort
that
of
you brought up
address
the
it?
ball of the foot. Oh,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. So I guys, it's a podcast, but like, so you can't really see, but if you take your hand and you have it out in front of you and you lift the middle joints of your fingers, and the bottom of your hand where your fingers connect to your foot, that's the ball of your foot.
Yeah.
So if you lift your middle joints up, that if you have range of motion restriction in your ankle and your calf, your your foot is at rest because of that range of motion restriction. Your toes are extend well, it's called extension. If your toe go
Mm.
when your toe comes up towards your nose, that's extension. And then if it goes down towards the ground, it's flexion. So if your toes at rest have to be extended where the middle joints are up, then you don't have the range of motion, then you have range of motion restrictions. So the ball of your foot is smashed down into the ground. And that if somebody who consistently has ball of foot issues, most often it's because they've got their toes are tight. The
Mm.
tendons in their feet and their ankle are they almost always have range of motion restriction in the ankle, and issues with the toe with the ball of the foot. And the ball of foot actually has a fat pad on it. But if you're constantly running where that is touching the ground first, or is in contact with the ground to at more of an extended amount, then that fat pad gets obliterated and you don't have that natural padding. So for me, that would say if your tissues, if your tendons and the soft tissue in your foot are under stress when they're at rest, you would want to reduce that stress by putting your foot into like a plant. If you point your toes down, when
Mm,
you're sleeping or you're sitting, your foot's at like 20 degrees, 20, 25 degrees of pointing down your ankle. It's called plantar flexion is the term, but at
mm,
rest, your foot is kind of floppy. But if at rest, if you don't have that range of motion available, then and you can see the tendons on the top of your foot, that's indicating those tissues aren't long enough for your foot to be able to go flat when you're running. And
mm,
so then that's also the source, that tendon tightness and the soft tissue tightness is, so if your toes are curled down when you're running and the top of the end of your toes is in contact with the footbed, every time you run, every step you
mm,
take, your toenails are being, what's the word I'm looking for? The toenails are being, I don't want to say cantilevered, but they're a source of, they're oh God,
it's
what's the word?
becoming like a lever or a hinge or
That's a
something.
lever. Yeah, they're the
Yeah,
lever. So you're
yeah.
so you're faulting off that the foot is made to basic, the heel or the midfoot. You land, initial contact is what happens first. And then your toes are supposed to be flat on the ground. And then during stance phase, your arch comes up, and it has to do with physics, but it all has to do with the muscle kicking in and lifting the arch. But then when you toe off, the foot is built to toe off with all of your toes flat on the ground.
Mm,
And then you toe off. And that flatness actually creates a little bit of a dome and it protects the metatarsal heads, which is the ball of your foot. If your tissues in your calf and your foot are under tension and they're not, and your toes are clenched when you're running, now you're smashing your toenails. Now you're getting, it's not more like more like it's more likely that your toes are clawing the footbed than hitting the end of the shoe. And
mm,
that's another misunderstanding is
yeah.
just there's just a lack of appreciation for the amount of what your toes are doing in the foot. And that has to do with range of motion first, because they just don't have it available. But it's also neurology as well. The way if you don't know how to lift your arch volitionally, like on purpose, if you can't purposely lift your arch, then your brain's not doing that when you're running. And that's a whole nother another article, a whole other course I need to write. But so that help, like, so just if you know what your range is, and so I do foot
Mm,
care consults with people virtually. And the first thing I do is I give them a PDF and I want pictures of their foot from all angles. We do an ankle range of motion test under load. And then I want to see how their big toe is moving. And so if you've got restricted range in your big toe, restricted range in your ankle, having a shoe that supports those restrictions is more important. But you don't want to only wear a shoe that supports
mm,
because your foot needs to move and you don't want to lose that ability to move. Like as a physical therapist, my thinking is like, how are you going to look in 20 years, 30 years? I don't want you to have gnarled up feet. So having a variety of your footwear will help your feet move properly and help you use them properly.
mm.
That's a very long answer to a short
No,
question.
I know what
Is
you
that
mean.
cool?
So when people have issues with losing toenails regularly, so I mean, over the years, I've been running. Well, I've been running for a long time, but ultra running for like 12 years, something like that, 13 years, however long it is. And I have lost toenails over the years in races. Um, but some people really struggle with that, and every single race they do, even if it's like a 50K, they end up losing a toenail. Is that so? Is that if someone struggles with that specifically, losing toenails, and it happens to them all the time? So you even hear about people having them removed, don't you?
Yeah.
Is that something that they should be looking at, like you're saying about the lever with the toes and everything? And could they be solving that issue with give it like by trying to get more mobility in their ankles? And is there certain things that people can proactively do to prevent them losing toenails?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. The consistent toenail loss is more often connected with mobility restrictions, and it's like the big toe. Those a lot of times the folks are the toes that are kind of in a bent position, that are kind of claw position when you're
Mm.
running. Those toenails are just getting the brunt of everything. And so there's a couple things. There's definitely improve the range of motion in your foot and your ankle. And that's pretty simple. I think all runners should be doing heel raises on a slant board when they brush their
Mm.
teeth twice a day. Everyone, that would solve a lot of problems in general. But so you can reduce some of the lever arm of the damage to the toenail, because a lot of times what's happening with the toenails that are turning black and falling off, there's some type of forces happening where the edge of the toenail is coming in contact with something. It could be the end of the shoe, could be your sock, it could be the footbed, and then the toenail is thick, right? So if you push on the end of your fingernail or your toenail, if you push up on it, you can feel it along the whole bed of the nail. And so an easy fix, and this is something that is John Von Hoff's wheel, it's kind of along his pet peeve, is if you file the toenails lengthwise before you're going to do an event that where you typically of a distance where you typically have issues with toenails, if you file them lengthwise and you're functionally shortening the nail because you're thinning the end of it and making it pliable. So ideally you file down lengthwise, and then when you run your finger against the end of the nail, you shouldn't feel anything catching.
Mm.
So if that's nice and thinned out and smoothed out, then there's less to catch on. But if your toenail does catch based on whatever's going on, it will just flex.
Mm.
And so the end of the toenail will simply flex. It won't cantilever or wrench the rest of your toenail up off the nail bed. And that's what's happening with the nail bed issues. It's that toenails being forced up off the nail bed itself. And then it bleeds because there's blood vessels and all that in there. And then
Mm.
it fills in the space. And now the toenail's higher. So it's going to catch even more. And it's a whole big thing. So that's where understanding the variables, and that's where taping can be helpful. In general, if you're taking the natural protection away, which is like calluses, taping over that area if you're doing a longer race is an ideal thing to do, because you've created a soft spot, and your body created that callus to protect for a reason. And so
Mm.
that's the general recommendation. But if you're consistently having toenail issues, understanding why that's happening, it's usually a range of motion kind of something. The shoes are a higher drop can frequently put the tissues on slack, and so that your toes can actually be flat when you're moving. But taping can be helpful.
Mm. Yes. So what's your opinion then? Pre-tape always, or tape when you get hot spots, or which way around? Do you recommend people find out for themselves, or is there like a blanket recommendation for always tape parts of your toes and your feet that you will get a hot spot on?
Yeah, so that's based on your experience, right? You learn, it's just like with hydration and nutrition. You learn that, I need a Coke at flat Coke at mile 60, kind of thing. You learn that through experience. So if if you've had issues in the past in a particular part of your foot and you haven't identified the cause and solved the cause, tape it. If in doubt, tape. If you take a callus off, tape it. If you consistently lose a toenail, tape that. Ideally, like, I'm more of a fix the cause than have to fuss around with your feet. There's a saying in medicine, 20% of the people have 80% of the problems, and that kind of seems to be the case with runners. Some people just have nothing but problems. And you just, if you know you've had if you've had an issue in a particular area and you're running a race that's similar in distance or terrain, then just protect it. Because tape, if you're using the proper tape, which is the kinesiology type tape
Mm,
that flexes, if you're
mm,
using that, the chance of causing an injury is so incredibly low. And then, like you said, during the race, never in the history of a blister has one ever gotten better by ignoring it. Can we just agree on that?
yeah.
That
Mm,
just ignoring it is not doing you
mm,
any good. Now, granted, if you've got 10 miles left and you
mm,
want to freaking get done, you're doing the math in your head and you're like, I would rather be, I've got a ginormous blister but you can manage the pain
mm,
and you know that the damage is not going to affect the race. Because if that's skin tears, then you got a whole mess. But if you do that math in your head, but if it's mile 40, of a 150-mile race, like prevention is absolutely critical. If you've got a hot spot, address it immediately
mm,
or as immediately as you possibly can. And do not ever use a hydrocolloid bandage or a blister patch
mm,
during an event because they have the potential to tear your skin off. Like it's horrible. I've seen so many train wrecks because they're called blister patches. So you think, oh, I'll put it on my blister. Well,
mm,
no. Here's the thing. If you understand the product that you're using and what its purpose is and its properties are, then you can make better decisions. So a hydrocolloid dressing or a blister patch, they are made to absorb water or absorb moisture. And they were made to stay on for the life of a blister, which is like 7 days, right?
mm,
So the adhesive is extremely strong. Strong to the point. So here's the thing. So you're on it during a race, you're running a trail race, you got your 250,000 sweat glands pumping out sweat. That hydrocolloid bandage is absorbing all that, absorbing it, and now you got movement because that's why you got a blister in the first place. You got a little friction, and so now that bandage is stuck to high heaven to your skin to 7 days worth is how it's as is the strength of the adhesive. It swells up, takes up more space. It starts to become just a gelatinous mess that can shift. And then instead of like a kinesio tape would just kind of it would move if it got stuck on something, or it would dislodge. The hydrocolloid dressing will tear the skin underneath it as it's moving. And I've seen the tip of a toe. I've seen tips of toes torn, like the just not just the dermis is even damaged, and you can't remove those during a race. Now, there are people who have not had trouble with those, but if the potential of catastrophic, I call that a catastrophic, like a hydrocolloid bandage related injury on the trail is tends to be more catastrophic, meaning it's tearing more tissue, causing more damage. You can't take it off. You have to just cut it down the best you can and then tape over it. So if there's a chance of that happening, it's better to avoid it and not use
mm.
it and just and use your kinesiology tape and you're good. But that is probably one of my biggest soapboxes. If I see somebody with a blister patch, I about lose my mind. They're not allowed. They're not
Yeah,
allowed in the foot care kits out in Western states. Like
yeah.
I won't have it. I'm not giving you the gun if you're
Mm.
suicidal. I know that's a little dark, but like if you don't have one, you can't use it wrong. But
That yeah, and that is and that's the case on races over here as well. That they're
ignorant,
races that think a lot about feet, which the spine race does. Um, so they sort of you as part of the mandatory kit, you have to have hypodermic needles. You have to have 2 rolls of K tape, like in your drop bag. You've got to have spare bandages. You've got to you've got to know your feet before you do that race.
I love that.
I don't think you can go into at least especially the longer versions of the race, like the full distance and the longer ones in there. You can't really do that race without sort of knowing your feet. And if you don't, then by doing that race, you 100% know your feet after it and you know what to do, which was probably the case for me. Um,
Yeah.
but considering something like that, so obviously there's now a trend for these really long, like adventure races, like Cocodona and Tahoe 200 and the Monster 300, all of these really long races. How important is hygiene for your feet? Because there's a difference in there between like patching your feet up in a 100 miler that if you're quick, you're done in a day basically, compared to these races where you're on your feet for literally, it could be like 5, 7 days that you're out there running. How important? How does it sort of how does foot care change from 24 hours 100 miler to 7 day adventure in the desert?
I think preparation is probably the biggest part. And then what I love about the longer races is that for the most part, people are moving at like a more measured pace.
Mm,
And they have the time to do things properly. I think that it's just like having a river crossing on a course that actually makes them think about their feet. So I love that. I will do consultations for folks. I for foot care for these multi-day races because there's a lot of different things to kind of think about ahead of time that are not even just foot related, like preventing, how do you prevent a bloody nose in the dry environments? Vaseline up your nose.
mm,
The bloody nose happens because the nasal tissue dries out and the blood vessels are right on the surface. And so
mm,
if you put like salty britches, which is lanolin based, that's my favorite maceration prevention product, or just straight up Vaseline. Aquaphor has like which I don't recommend for feet because we have better products available. The ones that have like for the lip balm that has like the little slanted tip, you can put that up your nose and then squeeze out a little bit of that because it's basically Vaseline. But that's a
mm,
side little tidbit. It, prevention. I did a consult for some folks, three runners at the Arizona Monster. One person's crew did such a fantastic job, and he did such a fantastic job with preparing that his tape lasted the entire race.
wow.
His crew put it on so perfect. He did all the things ahead of time. Made sure the he'd identified his causative variables for when he has foot issues. So he traced it back. I helped him trace back like why this is happening. These are the variables to address or to consider that are causative. So I've actually do some education for wherever I live. I have I'll train the local nail places on how to do an athletic pedicure. And so he made sure he had a pedicure ahead of time. His foot skin, everything was amazing. He used the products, just prevention. He knew the type of socks that works well, changed into different shoes later on in the race based on the terrain. So yeah, it's the same principles, but the costs for not taking it seriously, foot care seriously, are a great deal bigger or
Mm,
worse, like the effects, like for if you're 24 or 36 hours and you kind of drop the ball on your foot care, you can limp in, right?
mm,
But if it's 6 days worth and you ignored your feet, that's a lot of limping.
mm,
And it's not as sustainable, so the costs are higher if you don't perform the proper preparation. And so I think one of the biggest things that is, especially the multi-day events, is to using hand sanitizer. Here's the thing. I like to be as efficient as possible and cost effective as well, because a lot of times foot care people, when we volunteer at races, we're providing the supplies out
mm,
of our own pocket. That's a habit that I would like to change. If you're bringing the supplies to a race, there should be a
mm,
little bit of an effort to mitigate that cost to the person providing that care and the knowledge. But hand sanitizer and like a 4x4 gauze pad, those are like that's the best way to clean your feet when you're out on the trail. And so, like for a multi-day event, you want to have your feet as dry as possible, as often as possible. So if you're stopping and you're going to have a meal, and so you're going to be stopped for any length of time. Then you need to take your shoes off, wipe them clean with the hand sanitizer because of the high alcohol content that adds an extra drying ability to your foot skin. And so then you're just putting, and then just let your feet air out while you're sitting there having your meal and just being really perspicuous or just having a really strong, high attention to giving your foot skin a break as many times as possible and just being strategic about it. That makes sense.
Mm,
But I think, yeah, I think people take their foot care more seriously during a multi-day event or a longer one. And so
mm,
people tend to be a little bit more prepared because they're scared.
mm. Is
I like
is there any
scared
issue?
runners. Scared runners actually do, they take action.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. There's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being prepared, is there? Obviously.
No.
What is there any issues when you talk about like the hand sanitizer? Is that also is there with long races? Is there issues with like bacteria and things? Can things is that like an issue that you would be worried about? Because I always think of like feet sort of like festering in a
Uh,
shoe for like days and days and days. Is
they
that
kind
is
of are.
I need to get out more. Um,
Good
is
term. Pestering.
is that something that I'm just imagining, or should you be making sure your feet? Because I'm only thinking about like if you get a blister early on or something, and then especially over here, if you're going through like muddy farmers' fields, you're going through potentially running through wet fields with cows that have cow paths in in fields getting dirty. Is there any dangers of getting like infections in your feet in a race that could last like up to 6 or 7 days, or is that just a non-issue?
Um, I love that you brought that up. It's so interesting. The chance of something becoming a problem during the race is very, very, very low. Like with all the dozens of doctors that I've worked with at races where I've provided foot care, they're in general not at all concerned, even hardly even remotely, about infections happening. Um, because most of the foot care issues that are happening, it's the epidermis, which is dead tissue already. And the epidermis has been damaged. The dermis is then subsequently exposed. But if you are being just mindful of foot care, you lance a blister. The reason you lance a blister, like during an event, is because you're doing that in a controlled environment.
Mm,
You're putting a tiny little hole, a couple tiny little holes, and then you're covering it immediately. So you're protecting that dermis
mm,
underneath. And so the chance is really slim. And not to mention that like for the most part, like the dermis is more like venous blood flow rather than arterial. It's kind of
mm,
tiny little you would have to have the chance of infection from a wound on the foot would be if the dermis itself was damaged, and that
mm.
would be like a cut of
Yeah,
some
that's more like a
yeah,
catastrophic injury,
a
isn't it,
cut.
rather than
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. So that's the thing. If just providing the basic level of foot care during a race provides your basic level of cleanliness that you need. Because proactive and preventive foot care is you're protecting the tissues before they need protecting. You're preventing the dermis, the epidermis from being damaged and exposing the dermis underneath. And that's what the taping is doing. We're trying to preserve that tissue. You're drying your foot out using the hand sanitizer. So that's getting rid of the beasties. So in general, if something's going to happen, like an infection, it's gonna hit you after once you get home. So you're fine during the race. But just the act of providing proper foot care
yeah,
to be
is
able
enough.
to continue moving, that is addressing the issues. Now, you do bring up a good point. The thing that does happen, regardless often of how mindful you are of foot care, are a fungal infection, like athlete's foot. Now,
Mm,
once those little beasties get populated on your in your foot skin, anyone who's had athlete's feet,
mm,
foot, it takes time to get rid of. And the another manifestation of a fungal infection on the foot is when you get the deep cracks in the heel. That's not, if you've done all the things and they won't go away, and especially if they like crack and kind of are painful,
mm,
oftentimes that's an indication of a fungal infection. And here's the thing that just boggles my mind. People will spend, like, Western states is not easy to get into.
mm,
People will spend years getting into this race, preparing for the race, thousands of dollars getting into a race, and they will show up and they will have athlete's foot. They will have a fungal infection. Now, do you think a fungal infection makes your skin stronger and more resilient? No. So why would you, like, ignoring something? I think that's probably one of the things that just boggles my mind. I know, a lot of times it's not really that much of an issue. Your foot itches a little bit and you got some cracked skin, but um, preventing fungal infections, and that's where there's a sock called the Exoskins, has a copper
mm,
woven into
mm,
it's a yarn. Copper is supposedly, like, it helps with antibacterial,
mm,
antifungal factors, and so that's something that would be like an individual kind of decision. Like, if you know that you've ever had athlete's foot and you're going to do a 5-day race,
mm,
then you know that you're prone to it, and you might have, it might be populated somewhere. And so that would be, it's kind of a side note, but not really. Like, if I know that I tend to be prone to athlete's foot, then during a 5-day race, a longer race, I would put in measures to prevent it from settling in. And so just using some Tinactin, some spray, or a medicated powder, like, to prevent the athlete's
mm,
foot. But that's
mm.
kind of a side answer, but
Yeah,
thing to
yeah,
think
I
about.
know what you mean. Yeah, yeah, that is, yeah, people can spend a fortune on race entry and all the gear and everything and like super shoes, but yeah, turning up to a race with athletes, so that I know, obviously loads of people have like suffered with that over the years, and I have as well, and I've always used like the medicated powder that seems to
Mhm.
work really, really well. And in
Yeah.
fact, that was something that, whether this was right or wrong, I don't know. But one of the things I did for the winter spine race was so obviously when you get to each checkpoint, that's your time to sort of relax a little bit, get your kit sorted, have some food, maybe have a shower if you want to have that luxury before you sort of change into fresh gear and carry on. But one of the things I did was I had a pair of slippers. I brought a brand new pair of slippers, um, and I filled them full of medicated powder. And
Oh, great.
once I'd taken my socks off, and when I was then sort of walking around in the checkpoint, I would put these slippers on with the powder on and walk around in them while I was doing the things that I needed to do. And I don't know whether that was a good thing or not. Would you sort of recommend that? Is that another way of drying your feet out quicker, or is there an issue with sort of having powder on for too long in a big race? What do you think?
I think that's a fantastic example of good critical thinking on your part. You know yourself, you know your history, you were thinking proactively and preventatively. I think that was genius, and it's a fantastic thing. It was a fantastic thing to do. Yeah, because that's actively going to be drying out your skin. And then you're also repelling, you're preventing a situation, an environment where that fungus can kind of take a hold, because fungus, warm, moist
Mm,
uh, environment is kind of where it likes to live. And so you were just mitigating you identified the causative variables, you mitigated it, and you intervened. So that's just the best, fantastic thinking on your part. So
I think
yeah.
it was I think it was mainly just because I was terrified of having the feet that I had in the summer, and I wanted to do it. I wanted
Like
to
I
do
said,
anything I could.
Scared runners are good runners.
Yeah.
Scared runners are smart runners.
Well, I don't know about smart runner, but
But that's a great idea. Yeah. And yeah. And using, and that's in those multi-day races or even in the shorter ones, like just using every moment carefully uh is and intentionally is really the thing. You were multitasking, you were addressing as many variables as you possibly could. You weren't just fixing your feet and then twiddling your thumbs. You were like, you're changing your clothes, you're eating, you're addressing your feet all at the same time, you're managing as many variables at one time as you could so that you could be as efficient as possible so that you can, be on the course less time,
Mm,
which is ideal, right? And
mm,
that's one of the things that we're doing Michigan Bluff at the Western States. I've been there 16 years and I finally had enough foot care people this year that we are really working on fine tuning our pit crew. We've got like a we this year we were able to have a pit crew environment when a runner came in for as many runners as we could. For the majority, we were able to have two people per runner doing foot care, and then somebody else was managing all the other things so we could get people out of that chair as fast as possible. And so
mm.
I think that's definitely something to be mindful of. But yeah, so yeah, I would keep at it with the
Yeah, keep
power.
doing that. Um,
Yeah, that's great.
I think yeah.
Wait,
So talking about
pink?
Western states.
Wait, were the slippers pink or fun colored? Like, here's the thing, you know?
No, they were like granddad slippers. They were like
Oh, I love it.
grey and stripy.
Uh, give me some hot pink with polka dots on them, kind
Yeah,
of.
yeah, maybe, yeah. I
Nobody's
probably,
gonna
yeah.
steal those.
Just thinking about Western states, then I realised we've spent a lot of time talking about very British races,
Oh
like the
yeah,
spine and everything. But because I know my listeners will be thinking ahead for the winter spine that's coming up in January of next year.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's brilliant information, and that's great. Um, but obviously you're really involved with Western States, aren't you? And foot care there. So how has foot care changed at Western States since you sort of arrived and brought this new wave of foot care?
I have strong-armed my way into creating an actual foot care system and elevated the knowledge level of the people along the courses. So I think one of the biggest things is to have the proper supplies in the at the aid stations, and then have the people who are working the aid stations have just a basic knowledge level of how to intervene for foot care issues. So here's the thing. I'm sorry, but if you're involved in running, especially distance events, or somebody you care about is involved in running, you do not have the luxury of saying, "I don't like feet." Meh. Like, you just don't, because foot issues happen. You
Mm,
don't get to tap out. That's like saying, "I don't like water." Like, you can't, you have the responsibility. At some point, somebody is going to need help. And if you chose just because you think it's icky or like whatever, you can't offload foot care just to the weirdos like me who are super stoked about it, because we're not everywhere. I would like to get us, the a base level of competency everywhere. But even last year, so we've got proper foot care supplies. I've got training for that people have access to. My next phase is to make it mandatory. And then I've got trained people at the busiest aid stations where it's Michigan Bluff is really where most of the foot care stuff happens. But even with my attempts at making sure that everyone had just a basic understanding of just basic, assessment, how to use the different products, like it's really just taping mostly. Here's something that happened last year that just had me just absolutely apoplectic, or just like I was speechless and just outraged for the runner, because you know what leukotape is, right? It's in America, it's a beige, it's like a flesh colored, it's like strapping tape.
Yes,
Um,
is it like non-flexible like
it
K-tape?
doesn't flex at all.
Yeah.
It's like the duct tape of the 21st century.
Mm.
It doesn't flex. It has like a zinc oxide based
Yes. Yeah, I do
adhesive,
know now. Mm.
very strong. A lot of multi-day race people prefer that. They think it's stronger than kinesio tape.
Mm.
That's not necessarily, it's stronger in the fact that it doesn't flex, but it is not ideal for foot care issues for a lot of different reasons. The main thing is just being educated about the products that you're using. Kinesiology tape works really well because it's flexible and breathable, and it's very forgiving. You know, it's hard to screw it up. Like if something happens, you put the tape on, you get a little wrinkle, all you have to do is pinch it together and cut that little wrinkle out. You're not going to cut, you can't hurt somebody with kinesiology tape. Leukotape, you can harm someone. And this is what happened last year. Leukotape does not move. It does not flex and it has really strong adhesive. If you put leukotape on tissue that has to move and is flexible and under load, like the ball of your foot, and you put it on tightly, you can create skin tears because the tape doesn't move, but the tissue
Mm.
it's on is moving. The ball of your foot is flexing and expanding and contract. It's moving. It's a dynamic skin. It's a dynamic, your foot is dynamic and moving. And so we had somebody well-meaning, I don't know what in the heck, clearly they didn't watch my videos, but they put a piece of leukotape on the ball of the foot when they had the better option right there. They chose not to use it. They put the leukotape on, and there was a skin tear at the base of every one of the runner's toes.
Ouch.
Yeah. So knowing your products, using the product, knowing the conditions, knowing why you're using something, and just having just a base level of knowledge, I think is really important for
Hmm.
the like so anyhow, that's Western states. That just showed that somebody missed the training.
Mm.
And then I think with races like states that are so hard to get into, one of the biggest things that I've done is trying to in get the right people at the right places so we can really make a difference. Like if somebody's fumbling around with their crew and it's taken them 20 or 30 minutes to get their feet taken care of versus they come in and we work on them and it takes us 8 minutes to get you out of the chair. That could be the difference between whether or not you're getting a silver or a bronze buckle or whether or not you're finishing officially. Like, and
Mm.
so I think that's one of the biggest things that we've done at States is just really trying to elevate the knowledge level of everyone. And then pre-taping is something that I'm trying to have be something that's more of a common thing with bigger races. Like if you go to like a Nordic ski race, like a cross-country ski race, people will pay to have somebody put the wax on your skis. It's not that the skier doesn't know how to put the wax on their own skis. They just don't want to deal with it. And I get it. It's a race, they got a lot going on. And so that's one of the things I've started doing here in Florida because the races are different. They're on the roads. There's just not a lot of really of an opportunity for me to sit in one place and actually be helpful to a lot of runners like I am at States. So taping the day before and taping properly by somebody like myself who's skilled, who has experiences. And so I'm going through not just putting, usually the runner has an idea of what they need, but a lot of times they don't. And so then I can problem solve and be like, okay, if you've had this kind of stuff, oh, look at your big toe, it doesn't move at all. We got to do something. Yeah, like it's all so pre-taping and having somebody do that, do the pre-taping who is skilled is one of the things that we unveiled this year at States, and it was very well received. Last year, I just kind of offhandedly mentioned during the crew meeting, and then on Friday, I taped from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. without a break. I underestimated. But I think just elevating, I think races can do better by having like the spine races, you know, where they're holding people accountable. They're creating, you know, they're requiring people to have the
Mm.
proper supplies. for the conditions. I think that's critical. And then
Yeah.
just more people just, yeah, anyhow.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
perfect. I've just got to pause 1 second. I've realized that I've blocked my wife in on the drive and she needs to get out.
Oh no.
That's what the noise is. Give me 1 second.
No, it's okay.
I'm just gonna pause the recording. Give me a sec.
Yeah.
Okay, we're recording again. By the magic of podcasting, we are recording again. So apologies to Tonya and to the listener that I had to just do a quick pause to move a vehicle and avoid World War III with the wife. We were okay though, so we're all right. So right, where were we? We're still talking about Western States. I know we are gonna talk about the sort of services that you are offering and what you're going to offer. But I wanted to go back to just going back to Western States. You sort of mentioned about which was what was the checkpoint that you mainly work at?
Oh, I'm at Michigan Bluff, mile
Michigan Bluff.
55.
So yeah. So
Yep.
what is that like a critical point of the race for foot care? Because thinking about like the start of the race with the high country and everything, there's a chance of them getting their feet wet with snow and things like that. So is Michigan Bluff like a crux point of the race as far as your feet are concerned, or is it just like a natural place to set yourself up?
It is there's a reason why John set himself up there years ago as because it's kind of where it's a bigger aid station for one. But the runners have come through it's usually where the wheels start coming off is mile 55. So the runners have gone through the high country. Um, they may or may, their feet may have been exposed to water and wetness and especially if it's snowy or that kind of thing, they're moving differently, etc. And then they've come through the canyons, Duncan Canyon in particular. And so they've come through some really tough terrain. And if things are going to, and so a lot of times, so mile 55 or about halfway through, and then they've got on the other side of it is the river crossing, Rucky Chucky. And so it's a really ideal spot. If things are usually, if they're going to start to go wrong, they've either started to go wrong, are going wrong, or they're a freaking train wreck by the time they
Yeah.
get to Michigan Bluff. And because we're skilled there, they weaken the chance of us to be able to intervene in a meaningful way to get that runner to Auburn to the finish is a lot higher. So yeah, it's kind of all those things is where it is, the accessibility, the size. It's just the perfect spot.
Right. Okay. So that makes sense then. So, how have you sort of seen things change over the years then? In all those years you've been attending Western States, have you seen, is there any way of knowing what difference you've made as far as like, when if there's like do you do like surveys on people and find out that people have had better experiences with the feet now that things have changed, or is it just nobody knows the difference it's made, or is it just literally just like people reporting back to you that something worked or it didn't work?
Right? That's a good question. And so you're you're identifying the thing that I'm going to be appealing to the board to do. I would like to have been having a survey question about foot care in their post-race surveys that they distribute. That has yet to happen. However, I've been keeping data. One of the longtime volunteers at States, it's a dad-daughter duo, and they're just fantastic. But dad, we've been keeping track of the number of runners that we provide foot care for at Michigan Bluff. I think I started, I think 2012. So I've got that data and I know the average number of runners that come through. The average number that come through there is about 25. John would probably say 30, but so I usually say about 30. We'll just say 30, but 25. Definitely have noticed like this year I think it was because it was wet in the high country. We had almost twice as many people come through Michigan Bluff for foot care. Now there's a couple different variables. For one, people know know we're there,
Mm,
And so they're
Mm.
coming in rather than dicking around on their own. They just come straight in and they know we're going to get them taken care of in a timely manner and get them out on the course.
Mm.
So, the awareness that people, there's a higher level of awareness. I've noticed people are coming in, they're more prepared. This year, although we had almost twice as many people come in for foot care at Michigan Bluff than we've had since I've started uh, keeping tally, the issues and the damage to the tissues were significantly were mild. There were really we didn't have we've had a significant drop in, because that's one of the things I kind of keep track of, is like how bad were the blisters. If it
Mm.
was, you've probably seen the worst thing that can be happening during a race is when the bottom of the foot skin splits. You've seen it, right?
Mm.
Hopefully you haven't had it happen. It's
No.
excruciating. Yeah.
No.
That's when maceration, the skin's fragile, and it just the wrinkles rub together and then tear the epidermis, and then that just becomes a whole big thing. That really does not happen. I don't know. It's been several years since we've had a bad case of that coming in to Michigan Bluff, where you just kind of bring the edges together, tape over, you just tape and
Mm.
pray and be like, this is
Mm.
going to hurt, but you can still finish.
Mm.
It looks horrible, but you can fix that. But that I definitely noticed a decrease in like the more catastrophic more damage, more skin damage over the years, with since I've kind of strong armed and kind of forcing people to learn about proper foot
Mm.
care. They've got videos on the website. The medical director is very good about sending people, the runners and the crew, and saying, "Hey, just get a basic understanding of foot care." So I've definitely noticed that there's the issues that people come in with are less comprehensive, or less, their feet are much less of a mess, and people are using better products, and I think that's definitely contributing. But for sure, we're making a difference.
Mm. So it's a case of sort of educating people before the race,
100%.
so that they come into the race knowing that they should be doing this and that, and not sort of blindly winging it, and then just getting to Michigan Bluff and realizing their feet are destroyed and expecting them to be fixed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, prevention is critical. And I think there's, people are more scared. Like it used to be you could get into states every year and, get your
Mm.
1,000 buckle and all that. And now that's just, I mean, states is like it's heartbreaking to me that it's turned into, it's like a once in a lifetime thing. Like I
Yeah.
ask everyone,
It's
how
like
many.
winning the lottery, literally.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah. Like, people will sit down and I can't, I've been moved to tears more than once where, you may be able to, you may notice, I actually really care about this topic. I'm really passionate about, because I can help people, and you're helping people do something amazing and, stepping into their own superhero-ness. And to have somebody sit down, I'm going to get me now, like having somebody sit down at mile 55 of Michigan Bluff at Western States when they've spent thousands of dollars, thousands of miles in preparation. It's taken them years to get in, and they're sitting in my chair, and their race is being affected by something that was preventable.
Mm.
It absolutely just destroys me, breaks my heart. I do everything I possibly can to get those people out. But it's just like, this didn't have to happen.
Mm.
With just a little bit of thinking and a little bit of current knowledge. There's a lot of practices that people are using that are antiquated. We're not gone are the days where people like knowledge improves behaviors, right? And so I think it's really interesting with runners in particular how they can be dogmatic about some things and uninformed, but they can be super advanced and informed on other topics like hydration, nutrition, the clothing that they're wearing, that kind of thing. They're all the new and the shiny and like the best best products that they're using, but then they're using antiquated interventions on the feet
Mm.
by using, even I've seen people using athletic tape. Why? We have better duct tape. There was a time where Vaseline and duct tape were the only options.
Mm.
But we've moved on from that because there are better options. Like there was a time where our phone had a cord. Well, we've all moved on. We've adapted. We've learned.
Mm.
We've progressed according to the technology, and I think there's a really big opportunity for that for foot care. A lot of people are like, "Oh, I've always done this." Well, you know what? We used to always had a phone with a cord, but
Mm.
there's a better option. Vaseline is not the ideal thing. When it was the only thing to use on your feet, Aquaphor on your feet, when that was the only option, yeah, I
Mm.
get it. Use it because that was the only thing available. But there are so many better products to be able to that are available nowadays. And so shifting the thinking to using the better products, the best product for that condition, the conditions that you're in, and the type of issues that you tend to have, I think is where where I'm strong arming like the changes in the foot care. I've definitely done that at States. Like people
Mhm.
know at least the right products to use
Yeah, yeah,
with
absolutely. That was going to be one of my questions then. So, one of the questions that I had sort of got written down was, have how were things changed over the years as far as like advances in the technology that you use? Is there still some things that are just basic and will always be tried and tested and they'll always be there? Is there anything now that is like cutting edge that's come out that you were started to see sort of filter out into what you do at races? Or is there something that you think needs to be invented that you've got an idea of a product that should be out there that isn't out there? So if that's not too big a question.
Well, here's the thing. I wish there was like a shellac that you can put on your skin, your foot skin,
Ooh.
that
Mm.
100% prevents maceration.
Mm.
Like if that was available, then there would be so much less issues with feet in the grand scheme of things. So, yeah, if there could be something invented, but there's just a lot of it's problematic. Yeah, it's problematic. So I think, with the invention of kinesiology tape, the flexible, breathable tape, that is the ideal tape for feet and toes, especially. That has taken things to a whole nother level. So it's rare that I see duct tape used on the feet anymore. That's something that just can cause more problems than it's solving. I mean, granted, if it's all you've got, then that's what you use. But the adhesive is thick and just really hard to get off. The tape does not breathe at all. So you just have this little cocoon of like moisture and maceration and just gunk. It's just sweltering it's like a festering little toe cocoon if you're using duct tape. And then it slides around and it
Mm.
creates a sharp edge and can damage the toe next. It's just not necessary. So like the kinesiology tape 100% is a much better. And then having the different products that prevent maceration, such as like the Salty Britches is a lanolin-based product that was actually invented to protect skin in the ocean. And
Mm.
so salt water is, the most corrosive, form of water. And that really discovering that or having that be invented by Amy Tucker was has taken things to another level. So people have it's a much more of a burly product. Like it can last 12, 15, 16 hours in preventing maceration if you just have a simple issues. Squirrel's nut butter is probably another one of the more well-known products. So we have these specific products that are made to prevent maceration. And then from a powder perspective, the Blister Shield powder that is really the only powder to put in your socks other than the powder that you use to prevent the athlete's foot. The
Mm.
Blister Shield has PTFE, which is really lowers the coefficient of friction and
Mm.
lower number means it's more slippery, higher number means it's more coarse. And then it has deionized wax. So it's waterproof, and that can be really helpful. Like some people don't like to put like the term historically has been like lubrication.
Mm,
I'm trying to change that term to skin barrier because that's what the maceration preventing products really are
mm,
doing. You want to create a barrier on the skin. Like just because my training as a physical therapist, I've worked as a wound care specialist. And so that's my understanding of like the different, shearing forces and friction. Like it used to be all just because everything was called friction. And as you
mm,
probably notice, like I look at things from more of a comprehensive approach. And so, sometimes people would rather than smear something on their foot, they want to use a powder, so blister shield. So we have options to use. And then you have different socks, like the exoskin socks are probably the most technologically advanced sock with the copper, and it has actually copper and PTFE in the yarn of those socks. And then, we have more than one option for the toe socks. It used to
mm.
be just one brand. Injinji, kind of
Yeah.
revolutionized. They were
Mm,
fantastic. Like toe socks. If you constantly have to tape your toes, then try out toe socks because it saves you
mm,
from having a one thing to dick around with, right?
mm,
So it's good to see different brands because the different brands have different way of fitting.
mm,
So like an exoskin has a different type of yarn and a different composition and a different fit than an Injinji sock. So if somebody feels like they want to try a toe sock, and they try one brand and it doesn't really fit, that doesn't mean that that's not for them.
mm,
And
mm.
just try a different brand, try a different material. And so we have the different merino wools, like some people, and you've seen in the book, um, John has always used the book as kind of a platform to introduce people to different options, the different products that are out there. And I think like that having higher quality products. For years, one of the things that I've upgraded from is using tincture of benzoin to create a tacky substrate for the tape to stick to. I haven't used benzoin in years now. It's probably 5 years. I've upgraded to Mastisol or Skin Tack. And those are basically like a liquid resin, and they create a tacky surface that it actually protects the skin because the tape is sticking to the product, the resin, rather than the skin itself. And that's actually what they were invented for like people who have to wear adhesive on tender skin, like an
Mm.
ostomy bag or something like that. And so, yeah, I think upgrading products. But yeah, if we could just shellac the foot. There is a spray. I think you guys have access to it in the UK. It's like a spray-on bandage.
Yes,
I
I've
would
used
like
that before.
I would like to get folks to use that, like folks who've used like a skin barrier product like this Salty Britches or
Mm,
Squirrel's Nut, and then compare and contrast.
mm,
So we can have another option for folks. I know historically when I've used it, it was a different type of product. It would just get flaky and come off.
yeah, that's the
But
stuff I've seen. Yeah. Mm,
yeah, it was the second skin it was
mm,
like the liquid bandage, only just in a
mm,
spray. But a friend of mine he's from New Zealand, but he had like multiple 6-day event records, and he's like, well, I don't have any problem with my feet. I just like spray this stuff on there. But like he's one of those 20% or 80 percenters where he just in
no
general,
issue. Yeah.
he just doesn't have issues. So I'd really like to get more because yeah, did you try that spray?
Not on my
It,
feet. No, I just know that it was something that was in like a first aid kit that I saw, and we tried using it on somebody at work, and
yeah,
it seemed to work. It seemed to work, but then obviously that's not the same as having it on your feet and having all the forces go through it and pulling it off. And how would it
yeah,
stand up to that? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, the packaging says 6 hours is how long it lasts, so that's really kind of a pittance in a race, but it could
Mm,
be something that could be in the rotation, where you're
mm,
critically thinking a little bit more and changing the, changing strategies based on the conditions in the race, changing strategies based on the, how far you are into the
Mm,
race is a little bit some more higher level, foot care thinking as well. I
mm,
think
mm.
folks, like, sometimes you need to switch to a different shoe that has actual different qualities. Um, but yeah, if we could just shellac the foot, that'd be great.
So if anyone's listening to this podcast and they have access to technology that could be used for for
Yeah,
that,
just
get in touch.
100%
Get in
skin
touch.
barrier. But the problem is it needs to breathe.
Yeah, yeah,
You
that's it.
can't,
Yeah, you could coat it with something. You could coat it with something that would be durable and protect it, but then you've got the moisture issue, haven't you? So
and you've got your 250,000 sweat glands
yeah,
pump sweat into that area. But I
yeah.
think, yeah, that we would, it's a good time. Gone are the days of Vaseline and duct tape, which I'm very happy for.
Thankfully, thankfully. Finally, then, so how do people sort of benefit from your expertise? So you talk about, um, obviously we had this conversation off air, off while we weren't recording, of how you, since you've now finished your PhD, you have now got this time to think about things, and you probably got to write a book or make some kind of training film or some kind of online course to help people, just the general runner out there. Because obviously you do a lot with races, and you've got the obviously you've got the co-authoring of the book, and people can use that as a reference. But how are you sort of in now, like in bringing it right up to date? How are you going to be helping people? What are you going to sort of offer to people?
Yes. So now that I finally realize that everything I talk about from a foot care perspective is not obvious, because when you're, like, as we would probably notice, like, in the work that you do, the things that you do that you learned, you think
Yeah,
we can't
everybody
help
knows.
it. You
Yeah.
just think it doesn't. This is obvious, and I
Mm,
find myself, having the same conversation, educating about the same topics on a regular basis, and so
mm,
my next phase of life here is to actually create online resources for folks. It's been people have been asking me for years, but I just did not have the bandwidth to manage doing something new and different. Um, uh, the things that I'm building are online courses educating people about all things foot care. There's like a half a dozen articles that I'm working on writing, like just talking about how to choose a better footwear. Like, that's a course, but that's an article. Um, Having a foot care specialist certification is the vision
mm,
that so that people can go. I want to up the knowledge level and empower other foot care nerds to feel comfortable stepping into their space as an expert. There's so many people who are just, they're spending time and their own money buying supplies, volunteering at races. They could help more people if they were like, well, I'm a specialist, a foot care specialist. I would like to be involved in an official capacity at this race. Can I,
mm,
here are, like, I'd like to do pre-taping, like, before the race, or elevate their position. There's so many people who are at whatever mile of the race that they've been volunteering at for years, but they don't feel comfortable stepping in and saying, hey, this is my specialty. And I think if they have a foot care specialist certification that they've gotten through somebody like myself, then they're going to feel more comfortable stepping into marketing themselves as the expert that they already are. Because that's been something that people have been asking for. Um, yeah, having a specialization, and then just the online resources for people. And so I'm halfway through my second course. I have two courses available right now on my the online platform, just basics. And then now, hopefully, that I said it out loud, I'll get this
mm,
course I've been working on for a week. It's all,
mm.
I just need to finish it. So
I
that's
suppose if
that's the vision.
I think if you had like it's almost like an accredited course that people could do that you've put on, and because you're so well known in the game now that it would be recognized at big races. So that I've done the course. I'm not sure what you would call it. Um, the the Tonya. I'm trying to think of a funny name now, and I don't want to make light of it. But if there's like some kind of accredited course that you put on, people take that and then it's recognized by races that they go, oh, you've done Tonya's course. Brilliant, you're in
Yes,
here. You're fully in charge of sorting out training a team to look after the races. Is that the that
100%.
would be ideal, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that's been requested. Like I've got a friend of mine who we've worked, we've been elbow deep in feet on multiple occasions and he travels a lot. And I was like, how come you like why don't you do pre-taping at that event? And he's like, well, because I don't feel like I have I'm not, I can't, I'm, I don't have a way to call myself an expert. And I'm like, all right, well, we can fix that. Certification. And then, so that's the next vision because I love talking to people one-on-one, but that's no way to create meaningful change in the culture of ultra running
Mm,
or endurance sports. Like how Oh my gosh, I cannot tell you, and I won't tell you for like privacy reasons, but it is just absolutely just mind-boggling to me. The of people doing fastest known time attempts, or yeah, fastest known time attempts
mm,
on trails. They're usually people who are fast. They are resilient, they're strong, they've got their hydration and nutrition, they've never had foot problems, and they have no foot care plan and they're going to be on a trail for days
mm,
or weeks and then
mm,
they're surprised
mm,
when something happens with their feet and they're
mm,
flummoxed and baffled. Oh, then this never happened before. Well, have you ever
mm,
run for 30 days straight? Like,
mm,
like of course you were going to have foot issues. Like I was just called in as an expert for an event that is marketed towards just kind of more regular people, and they're doing marathons on the trail. And they were shocked last year at their inaugural event that they had foot issues. Didn't occur to them that like as or race organ at the event organized and the people who were in the event were surprised that they had foot issues, but it's just a matter of time. And so elevating that knowledge, using the right
mm,
products, teaching people to think better. And so that's my secret plan is to have no more races affected by preventable issues. If we just create current best evidence or current best practices, I would love to have races have consistent foot care systems in place.
mm,
And so that, yeah, it's just heartbreaking when it's just unnecessary.
mm.
Your
Do you
feet are your transportation. Why do people not take care of them?
Do you think it's just that people, like you say, have sort of shied away from the feet? It's like, feet. Um, Not everybody's into feet, and I know some people are into feet,
Yeah.
literally. Um, do you think that's what it is? It's just people just neglect it because it's just like, oh, it's just your feet. No one really wants to be touching your own feet or other people's feet.
Yeah, some people just don't like feet. They're not interested, and which I don't think is a luxury that you have if you're going to be involved in running. Yeah, you don't have to be the first person in line saying, "Ooh, show me your feet," but you don't get to be ignorant. You just don't. Like seriously, learn something. Like just learn some basic, or at least have supplies, the proper supplies. If you have the proper supplies, then you can prevent. And I think what happens is the most common thing people say, "I've never had anything happen with my feet." So and so unless they have somebody in their world that has had a foot issues that made them realize, oh fudge, I need to do something about this and be preventive. Like we all have that learning opportunity, but I think so many people just don't have trouble during training and they don't appreciate that the long race that they're running is different than the training. And so and they do have feet and it's a matter of time. Your
Mm,
feet are going to be affected by distance and hours out on the trail or the road or the track or wherever you are. At some point, your feet are going to be becoming an issue. And I think folks are just, oh, it's never happened before. And so they just get complacent and then they might get poor recommendations given. And so then they feel like they can't do anything. So somebody will put duct tape and Vaseline on their foot and then they wonder why it didn't help. And so then they think, what's the point? And they don't realize how preventable foot issues are. So Yeah, it's just you kind of become who you hang around. So if your friends have benefited from your experience at Spine,
Mm,
because now you're a proponent of proper foot care, because you had to learn the hard way. And
mm,
I think that's kind of the attraction. Those of us who are attracted to running long, you know, we're masochists. Oh, like there's something little sideways in our heads. Like we
mm,
want to suffer.
mm.
We
But not
pay
too much.
we pay money to suffer on purpose.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
what is, and I think a part of like, foot care is it's in your own way. It's meeting like finding your um what your threshold, like the pain threshold, or it's just a new way to find a limit that you didn't know you had.
Mm. And then back off from it because you don't need to be in that kind of pain in a race.
No, it's completely unnecessary. But
Comfortable. I like to be in comfortable pain. If does that make
yes,
sense? So I know the pain that I'm going to be in a race, but there's a certain pain that I don't want in a race that so I want to be comfortably in pain.
yes, you want to be comfortably uncomfortable
That's the one, yeah.
and to not have lasting effects.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the thing, like, just the process of being the skin being macerated for hours and hours and miles, that actually your skin, I've heard this reported by many, 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 many people. They're like, my feet got really macerated during a race. They were super painful. The skin didn't break, but they were really painful. I should have done a better job. I should have thrown some tape on or whatever they'll say. But then they find that their skin breaks down, is more prone to breakdown or blisters or being painful for weeks
Mm,
afterwards. And so a poorly timed foot issue can affect your entire season. If you get skin breakdown during your race or, one of your early races in the season, your feet can be more
mm,
sensitive for weeks afterwards. And then that they're more prone to damage. So if you're not aware of that, then and you're not being more proactive because your skin's more tender and prone to injury, then you're not going to do the things to prevent the injury, and then it becomes like a negative cycle and you're like, what, I've never had this happen before. Well, because the lasting effects of maceration. And so if you're running on feet where the skin is torn at the bottom and you've got like a freaking bouquet of blisters on your toes, yeah, that takes time to heal. And so your mindset of preventing pain, your comfortable pain is also the long-term effects. Like I've had runners who've had really deep blood blisters and they've continued to run and they report a decreased sensation in that area for up to 6 months afterwards.
mm,
So preventing can also, you have to think about how long it's going to take to recover
mm,
as well. So it's not
mm,
just during the race that you're preventing that pain or that injury. You're preventing injuries, skin injuries that
mm,
can have lasting effects.
Yeah, that's interesting actually because I'd completely forgotten about the weeks and weeks and weeks of like numb feet after like my feet had healed.
Right.
They were just like like almost like a dead like the nerves have been like
Yes.
destroyed for weeks and
Yeah,
weeks.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that's what's happening. Okay, so have you ever worked or known anyone? If you've ever worked in the restaurant industry, especially where there like a lot of burgers are made and
I
served.
haven't, no,
Okay,
no.
so when I was a kid, I worked at a restaurant. We sold a lot of hamburgers, right? The cooks didn't use spatulas because they took too much time to use, which is insanity in the first place. But they physically could not feel the pain from the heat of the meat on the grill because the nerves in the tips of their fingers actually had retreated because of that constant insult and the constant injury. It's actually a thing that happens. The
Yeah.
nerves have receded. They've retracted because they're like, oh yeah, that's just dumb. Or I'm getting injured if I'm over there. And so that's from that injury, that's what happened to the dermis. Exactly what you describe, that's the physical cause of that decrease or altered
Mm,
sensation,
yeah.
is those nerves were damaged from being exposed. and it takes a little bit of time for them to fully come back.
I wasn't ready for that. That was something I'd not. People had said, "Oh yeah, your feet will be numb afterwards," and I like didn't really. It was one of the things that I hadn't really thought about, and I was like, "Yeah, yeah, absolutely, that is 100% true."
Yeah.
That's random. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love that because now there's somebody who's going to be like, oh, this is normal, who's
Yeah.
not going to go to the hospital in a panic thinking.
Well, that's it. It's education into. I'm hoping that this podcast can be like a bit of an evergreen episode, so people can sort of refer to it before they do big races, because these big races,
Yeah.
they're not happening all the time. They like happen probably once a year, or someone will build up to a big race and then they have this question of like, my feet. What do I do about my feet in this specific race? And they'll be able to sort of refer to this. And hopefully, I think we've covered so much ground that there'll be something in here that will be applicable to their race. I'm I'm like conscious of the time. I've realised how long we've been on, and
No, it's all right. There's so much to talk about.
there
I
is.
love that it gave me the opportunity to talk about feats because like I just feel with every bit of knowledge, I just knowing that somebody can have a better race, that somebody can meet the goal that the challenging goal that they set for themselves in a more comfortable way.
Mm,
It just makes me realize like the time and effort that I've spent like just kind of learning about this topic. I just feel like it's just so important to we can help people have a meaningful change in their race experience with just a little bit of knowledge and stuff
mm,
that I forget that it's not obvious. And so yeah, so the this podcast will be very good. The website where I'm putting my online resources is
yep.
drtonyafootcare.com, and stay tuned for that certification. It's going to be like I can the vision is like multi-level, and then having the highest, the most advanced certification. My thinking is you will have to come to Western States and work with me.
Mm. Oh,
How
but yeah, that's worth it just for the trip into anyway. So
right? It'd be like because yeah, I think there's just I love that you're wanting to spread this knowledge. It's like a spontaneous gift to the running community.
mm,
Amplify voices of people who have, our niche knowledge. Is it
mm.
niche or niche? And
Yeah,
are
we say niche over here, but
niche?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the niche folks who've been toiling in the background for
Mm,
years. I think it's important. But yeah,
yeah.
your feet, they're your transportation. Why do we not give them more attention?
So also there's the book obviously as well. So
Yes,
in the show
fixing your
notes,
feet,
I'll link to Fix Your Feet. What's the full title? Fixing Your Feet.
fixing your feet.
Fixing Your Feet. Yeah. So yeah, I'll put a link to that in the. What's the best way to link to that then? Is that through Amazon or?
I think Amazon's the easiest, yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that then, so
Think
people
about
can.
that. John Von Hoff just invented foot care as a thing
Mm,
because he's a thinker, and he was, running ultras back in the 80s, 90s, and he noticed people were having problems, and he's just like, well, let's figure this out.
mm.
It's like,
Let's
how
fix your
cool is
feet.
that? Yeah, how cool is that?
It is pretty cool. So, appreciate you coming on and giving up your time. I know that's something you're passionate to talk about, and I think we could probably sit here all night and talk about feet.
Yes.
Not sure everybody would want to listen to 4 hours of foot care, but yeah, I think it's important to talk about it, and people that do the kind of races where feet are an issue, then I think this would be essential listening. So I appreciate you giving your time and your expertise and sharing it with my listeners and viewers. So much appreciated, Tonya. Thanks very much for coming on.
Yeah, super happy. Thank you so much for inviting me and letting me talk about feet, my favorite topic. Okay, happy feet, people.
Happy feet, everyone. I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye 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 bye.